Welcome back to Fable Talk. This week, I speak with one of our extraordinary playtesters, Jarrett, who's been a part of Fable's End for a few years now. We discuss multiplayer games, single player games, one-on-one fighting games, and a bunch of other stuff. Let's go. So, Jarrett, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Jarrett. I'm from North Carolina. I've been here my whole life, pretty much. Uh, I have a relatively short history with TCGs, actually. I played Yu-Gi-Oh! A little bit as a kid, and I remember doing like local tournaments, but I don't think that lasted very long. And then years later, I was introduced to Magic and then never found anyone to play with. So that was kind of on the shelf for a while. And then finally in college, I learned Weiss Schwartz through a couple of friends and started going to events for that. And then I learned Magic again, and then actually realized, like, hey, there's actually a scene for Magic as well. I can go do that. So then I played Magic for about 2 years. And then as I was kind of losing interest in Magic because of not having that much of a community that I resonated with, then I found Fable's End at a convention called Playthrough. Uh, and it was like a really good timing of like, hey, this is a new game to get into, but also it was hitting a lot of the factors of stuff that I really wanted to see out of TCGs that I wasn't seeing out of Magic or Weiss at the time.
And this was what, 3 years ago, I think, at this point.
Something like that, maybe even four. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can't. The time that all the like timeline is totally escaping me
Yeah,
now. I
it
don't
was, it
even
was
remember. I feel like it just feels like this is how it's always been. Like I just feel like you have always been
right.
around.
Yeah,
Um,
it was when we were still wearing masks from the pandemic, I remember.
okay, so that was 2021 then. So that was 4 years ago. Oh, it's
Yeah.
crazy. 4 years.
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh, I can't believe that. Um, so for anyone that is unfamiliar with our Discord, or people that are familiar with our Discord, Jarrett is responsible for a lot of the fan fiction short stories that
Yeah.
have appeared in various places on the Discord. Um, and Jarrett has also contributed pretty heavily to our playtesting group and has done a lot of the brainstorming for like how to make an idea work within the world of Fable's End. Um, and because he's been around for so long, I just consider him to be part of the just kind of part of the Fables End family. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's how I
Yeah.
feel about it. I feel like it's
I,
like couldn't be what it is without you being around.
I'm
Um,
probably also the only one that can claim that I've slept on your floor, right?
that's true. Yes, you have slept on my floor. Jared did come to New York City and actually stayed with me for a few days, which was pretty fun.
Yeah, that was
We
a
had
lot of
some
fun.
and then we ended up playing. We did a good deal of like Fables End playtesting with Eric, who
Yeah.
also lives in NYC. That was a really fun day. It was great. I really enjoyed that. They got to dig through some of the stuff that they hadn't seen yet. So that was a lot of fun. Um, so you mentioned some of the stuff that you were looking for in a card game where Fable's End was kind of hitting the right notes for you. Do you want to elaborate what that means in terms of gameplay or a community or however you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so in this instance, I was talking more to the gameplay side of things, which it was also hitting on similar notes to Flesh and Blood, which I had started getting into around the same time that I found Fable's End. And that's mainly where you're refilling your hand every turn, and the game becomes more about like, okay, my current hand is a puzzle to solve. Whereas I was kind of feeling like, more traditional games like Magic or Weiss, where you're just like drawing the one card a turn. It's like, yes, there is long form strategy, and you're figuring out what to do in each situation. But I kind of liked that element that that Fables End and Flesh and Blood were bringing, where it's like each hand is its own little puzzle to solve, and how do you maximize what you're getting out of it and actually able to like play play out all these cards and then still be able to do things next turn. And that was really exciting to me. And also just having these kind of alternate resource systems where instead of having like, oh, here's my array of lands that I'm going to tap to pay for my abilities, it's like, okay, here's something that is a bit more, I want to say flexible, to where like if you literally play your cards right, you can get so much more juice out of it and just keep playing things that it comes out in a way that's not even like like overpowered or crazy, or like I'm doing like the most broken storm deck or something like that. But it's like it feels like you're playing with power in a way that is built to be balanced, if that makes sense.
Hmm. When you're playing, um, what do you think, like generally speaking, is the aspect of trading card games that you really really enjoy? Like, what is the, if you could boil it down to like a handful of talking points, like why trading card games for you? Why is that the game that the gameplay, or the style of game that really resonates with you?
I think a big part of it is, especially when you're playing 1v1, it definitely feels like a very pure form of competition between well, in one way skill, where just figuring out like what are the cards on the board, what are the cards in my hand, what am I doing with that right now. But that also has a nice element of randomization with like what cards do you draw, that kind of thing, versus like chess hasn't appealed to me that much, just because it's so like, it's just like the starting point is the starting point. It's never going to be different. And if you know how to play the game, like, it's like the solved game kind of concept.
Right.
But also the kind of, I guess, the other main part of TCGs that appeals to me is how you are able to build your own deck, and that is like a unique set of game elements that you bring with you. That is like, this is how am I expressing myself in the game. This is my build. This is how I do the strategies I want, and then you can run that up against anyone else's build and maybe even see card interactions that you never dreamed of.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite parts about trading card games is the customization. I think I'm a big, I've talked about this before on several other episodes, that basically any game where I get to like customize my own pieces and bring them to the table as like, this is me, this is my, I'm playing this deck and you're playing something totally different. That's absolutely my jam.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting to see how players can bring something totally different and it all has to be mitigated through the same rules. I find that idea really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, and something like Warhammer intrigues me from a similar aspect, but it's also, I feel like, a lot more intimidating, and also seems like a much higher price point to start with than most TCGs.
Sure, for sure. I have a few friends who play Warhammer, and it's a different kind of commitment.
Yeah,
It feels like a whole other level of commitment. I think TCGs are a fairly high commitment in terms of like hobbies or games. I think most people that are serious about them are going online and trying to find those cards, and maybe they're spending $25, maybe they're spending $10, but there's per card, but there's this like dedication to it that
right.
feels a little like more intense than just playing a normal series of board games, because of the collectability, and also the like collectability is tied into the power level, and Warhammer is just on another level. It
Yeah,
is it is just you're not only are you buying your custom pieces, but you're literally like painting them too. So there's this whole element of expression that goes into it that's not really available in TCGs. It's really fascinating. And I've never played a minis game. I don't. Have you played minis before? Have you ever done Warhammer or anything like that?
um no, I haven't. I was trying to think if I've played anything that's like a more casual, just like out of the box game, and I don't think I really have, actually.
Yeah, me neither. I've not tried it, although in theory, I think I would really enjoy it. It looks like fun. I like the. It feels very grokkable in the sense
Yeah,
that everything kind of works the way you would expect it to work, right? Like a ranged weapon has a distance that you could literally measure with a ruler.
yeah,
Um, like how the weapons would work, or how positioning works on the board seems to like follow the rules of the real world. So on
Yeah.
that level, I think there's probably something really intuitive about minis that would be really exciting, and the fact that you can customize them and bring in like, well, actually, I have my undead army, so they have special rules as opposed to your like Space Marines or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think that aspect of gaming is very, very interesting. It's really it kind of like any game that I've ever been attracted to has had that element of customization where I bring my own pieces. And I hear what you're saying about chess too. Chess feels like you said solved almost, where it's just kind of like once you get locked into, despite the myriad of different moves you can make, and there's probably no chess game that operates exactly the same way, but you start to work your way into like a smaller and smaller box of options.
Yeah.
And then as you approach the end game, it feels like a foregone conclusion sometimes where
Right.
um, you once you know what's going to happen, it's just kind of like, well, that's what's going to happen. It's
Yeah.
also a game of like, I think the randomization that you were talking about before with trading card games is a nice way to balance differing skill levels.
Hmm.
Because chess is very much like, if I'm good at chess and you're not good at chess, I will win like 100% of the time. If I play
Yeah.
someone who's better at me than chess, it's very, very, very rare that I will beat them. And that sort of just sheer translation of skill to outcome doesn't I don't that doesn't appeal to me at all.
Right.
I know it appeals to a lot of people because it is a demonstration of skill, and when you're really good at chess and you have a really good ranking, then it's very impressive. And I'm like super impressed by people who are very good at chess.
Yeah.
But it
I get-
it always feels like I don't know, the randomness in trading card games can kind of mitigate that skill differential in a really interesting way. So no game really feels like it's a total blowout from skill. It's like, oh,
Right.
I just didn't draw well, and I have to work with what I have.
Yeah. I guess it's kind of ironic that I am like pretty interested in fighting games. I'm pretty bad at them, but like they are kind of a similar thing to chess where like the better player will almost always win because it's, it doesn't have that randomization. It is a very like skill intensive, but at least to me, they are more interesting than chess, even though in a lot of ways they're kind of the same thing on a basic level.
What fighting games do you like? What's your
Um,
jam?
I play like Street Fighter sometimes. I like Killer Instinct a lot. Um, I grew up playing a lot of Soul Calibur with my dad, even though I didn't really know many of the deeper mechanics growing up. I was just like, I want to hit people with my giant sword as Nightmare.
There's a really nice I find myself very drawn to fighting games also. It's really interesting. I think you and I have a lot of like our interests and our what we find appealing about games is there's a lot of overlap. They kind of map onto each other neatly.
Yeah.
For me, I love fighting games. I'm really bad at them, but there's an aesthetic about them that I've always loved. I love the
Yeah.
aesthetic of fighting games. And I
You
also
should
love
try
the
it.
idea that like you choose your fighter and your fighter will it reflects a play style, and that there's different play styles and there's different
Yeah.
strategies and character archetypes. And I think that's super interesting in the way that the metas of fighting games work out, where, oh, this person has like just enough reach to where they can kind of, bridge the gap between all of these other characters. So they're overpowered because they just have like really good base punches or whatever. No
Right.
one, no one can get close enough to them to do anything. And that it's like that one little tiny detail can completely shift the meta of how everything works within a fighting game environment. It's super
Yeah.
interesting.
And I guess one thing I have thought about before that I think it's true with almost any kind of game, but I think is especially potent with something like fighting games and chess, where like there is a separation between what the game is and what the meta game is in a way, where like chess, like you can pretty easily garner like, okay, this is how the pieces move, this is how you play the game, this is how you win. But then the meta game is the huge like vast part of it where like like what are the sequences of play that people normally do, how do I make my opponent think I'm doing one sequence of play when I'm actually doing another so that I can put them into a trap, which is also exactly what fighting games does. And to a degree card games can do that as well, but I think I think like the metas can still be very like wide and complex, but they're maybe not as like deep a pit to invest into or like get lost in as easily as a new player as you could with chess or a fighting game, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Are you preferential to one-on-one games versus multiplayer games, or is it just more like there's a different kind of multiplayer experience you're looking for?
Um, I think generally, if I'm gonna be playing a multiplayer game, I want it to be more of like a party vibe, like something like Munchkin or like the Jackbox games, where it's like you're not necessarily like grinding your best skills against each other. You like there are ways to like one up your opponents and get better outcomes, but a lot of time it's just you're doing something fun together and you can do things that'll just make your friends laugh or say like, "Oh, you're so evil," that kind of thing. Whereas in one-on-one games, I really want to usually be more along the lines of like, okay, I'm demonstrating my skill and going up against your skill, and we'll see who like the actual legitimate victor is.
Do you play competitively? Any trading card games or fighting games?
Um, Technically, I guess I play Flesh and Blood competitively because I do show up to the local weekly events. I mean, it's like the most casual level of competitive. But that's about as far as I've gone. I don't think I would ever go to like a big regional event or whatever to compete. That just seems exhausting to me. Um, but I would be intrigued by the idea of going to one and treating it like a convention, like going around seeing like the artists that show up and possibly getting cards signed, seeing if anyone's cosplaying, doing side events, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, just the idea of playing one card game for like 8 hours in a day where you have to be like on point, playing all the rules correctly, or you're gonna get like kicked out or whatever. That just seems stressful and tiring.
Sure. I think it's a different kind of mental game to be able to
Yeah,
do that for 8 hours straight for 2 days or 3 days or however long a tournament can be. I mean, I really it's an interesting like microcosm because I don't think the rest of the world truly understands the level of focus that's necessary for long form gaming.
yeah,
Particularly, the one thing that Kwame and I will get together often and we will sit down and we will like grind out for 6 hours straight. We'll play just game after game after game after game. Oftentimes because we're trying to look for a solution to something or we're trying to like test the boundaries of a system. And after 6 hours, man, I'm done. I do
mm,
not play well. And a lot of it's just like I forgot to eat lunch, and because I didn't eat lunch, my brain is falling apart. And
yeah,
I I have a lot of respect for that, the 8 hour grind and being able to like maintain that level of focus or maintain that level of optimal play.
yeah.
But also for the audience to know, Jarrett is our second place winner for the first Fables End tournament. So
Like,
despite
even though
despite
there was a
the
rules violation,
the wait, say that again.
despite the rules violation in that final match.
Oh, what did you violate? Which rule?
It was something about I think it was probably yeah, because I think Tylen was playing the Kraken deck. I think he attacked with an Ocean Mother into my hand when I didn't have enough open shields, and neither of us realized that. I'm like, okay, yeah, here's a card.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Okay, so his win was illegitimate, and we need to strip his. We need to take away his bona fides and put him into some kind of purgatory. Um,
Or we could just do a
well,
rematch.
yeah, we'll have you will absolutely have a rematch. And when we are at playthrough in October this year, because it was moved from March, a playthrough would actually be happening, probably would have happened last week if it were normally the normal
Yeah.
schedule. I think they've shifted over to October permanently, because I think they can get more space for the convention. But when we're there, we will have another tournament, and you will be able to seek your revenge. And we will have more people there, so we will actually have a judge watching that match to make
Mm.
sure that we're doing everything legit. Um,
And I, I'm not sure if I should ask this question. I guess it can be edited out if not. But is product meant to be in our hands by that point? So we would be playing the tournament with our own decks, or would that be
yes,
pre-mades again?
hundred
Okay.
percent, 100%. Yes, we would most likely we will keep that format that we had, where which is kind of the pre-constructed, we call it like a pre-con tournament, where
Mm.
you just pick a kingdom and then you get a pre-built like demo deck for that kingdom. and then you'd be able to, and that's just what you have for that tournament. But we'd also have a separate constructed tournament where people would be bringing their decks. And I think by that time we would have minimum one expansion, if not two expansions out. I could see us having uh, our first expansion and maybe our second, depending on the delivery date for that. But that one's almost done also. It's just like wrapping up these final little designs and trying to get the balance right.
Yeah.
And it's just small tweaks. So once we get the cards that we were testing yesterday, once we get that figured out and solidified, then our first expansion's pretty much ready. And it's just getting the like a handful of art pieces to be tightened up, and then we're gonna have Eric comb through the language and make sure everything's kosher, and then that expansion is pretty much ready to go. Then the next expansion would follow that, and then we have to do the same process. I don't think there's anything in that expansion that really needs to be changed, though. The second one, our introduction of the Fifth Kingdom, that I don't think that expansion has
Yeah.
any problems. It seems
Yeah.
to be
Yeah. It seems good to me.
yeah, I think like universally amongst all of us and the playtesters, we're pretty we feel pretty satisfied with where it's at. I don't think there's anything to be concerned about. And then the following expansion just needs a lot of like artwork done.
Hmm.
Um, so I think by October, I could imagine us having two expansions out,
Yeah.
and that would
That'll be exciting.
that'd be so exciting. I'm oh man, I can't even explain to you. Once we have a tournament where we have constructed events where people are just bringing in decks, and I think there will be a good variety of decks, um, because the meta is so new. It would be really hard to know where the
Yeah.
power is and like what deck. And even amongst ourselves, as much as we track that during playtesting, there's a lot of new cards get introduced to the meta all the time. So it's really hard to like pinpoint exactly which deck is dominant, which card is running a format,
Yeah.
and really I don't think any of them are at the moment.
Right.
Um,
And I'm not sure if for any game, if any playtesting team has ever entirely locked down what the player base will find. So
right, I know, and that's the thing is that for as long as we've been playtesting these cards, and some of these cards we've been playtesting for like almost a year,
yeah.
and it for all of that playtesting, and we've gone back and forth between a lot of different ideas. We've definitely tweaked a lot of things. Some of these card designs have been around for years prior to even us having a playtest group where Kwame and I made these designs, or I made a design and Kwame and I were playtesting them, and they were like, "We think these are fine." You three have really discovered a lot of things about them that are like, "Oh yeah, that's when we take this card and we introduce this other thing to it, it becomes a problem." And that's been extremely useful to see how a specific design can seem on its surface really balanced, and then the more the like further you push it with the deck builds, the more it starts to reveal whether or not it's balanced, and that extra layer of like redundancy has really shown us where the card balancing needs to be tightened up, and I think we've
Yeah.
done that for the most part. So
Yeah. I think it definitely seems like a really true equivalent to me with like writing, where like if you write this book and you're like, okay, I love this main character, they're like the greatest person ever, whatever, and you have someone read through it and they're like, this person's kind of a jerk, and you're like, oh, how did that happen? Let me like rewrite this to make sure it's what I intend to come out. I think it feels a lot like that.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of bias that goes into designing things and writing things and being an author, being a creator. I am not immune to it. I'm very susceptible to it, and despite my best efforts, I will definitely come up with ideas in our little like Discord chat where we have for listeners in the Discord chat that is our playtest group. We have a little like card ideas channel, and so we're just constantly throwing stuff in there. And I feel often like my ideas are really solid, and then I think about them for a few days, and I'm like, that idea makes no sense. That is so broken, or the play of this would not be very fun. Because I get really excited about just trying to do something to see if just to do it. And I will take an idea and put it in playtesting, and Tylen will show me like, actually, this idea sucks. Or you will show me, Jarrett. You'll be like, oh, I'm gonna build a deck out of that, and I'm like, that card's broken. Oh fuck. Um, So
Yeah, because I think I'm probably in a similar boat where whenever I envision a card, I think about like the one or two interactions that I'm really thinking about when building it, and but then it's like, oh, but if you look at it like when it hits any of these other five cards, it does insane things. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
right, I think that's just design bias, right? Like I think that's
Yeah,
I think that probably the hardest thing to do when you're designing cards for a card game is to remember while you're designing it that whatever specific function you're designing it for, it also applies to literally everything else in the game. So you say, yes, this interaction that I'm designing it with for is really fun and really cool because now it works with this card. And everyone goes, wow, that's really great. And then you have to remember, yeah, but also it's available in all of the other builds. So now whatever the exploit is that you have specifically designed this card to employ, that exploit can be used by all of the other kingdoms or all of the other cards as well. And then all of a sudden it becomes this like, well, now I don't even know where the power level lands
yeah,
because there's just so many possibilities and they all feel um beyond the power level of a normal ability. And so you have to rein that in. And that's just design bias, but it really speaks to the utility of playtesting and how important it is to playtest because you just can't, as one person, it's impossible to see everything.
yeah, and like it even seems like even like big companies with like the top tier designers and QA teams and whatever are not immune to that. Like I'm remembering in Diablo 3, there was an exploit people found where like so the assassin has an ability that has a chance to just kill the target you hit by doing like a million damage to it basically. And then the necromancer has a spell that spreads out damage between enemies. And within the power fantasy of the necromancer, that makes sense. Like you're sharing their
Mm.
life forces together or whatever. In the power fantasy assassin, it makes sense. Like you could just kill something. But when those two are playing together, the assassin hits the instant kill on one enemy and it just spreads to all the other enemies, and you just nuke an entire group. And it's like that's not how this was meant to go.
I'm sure that even when Blizzard first found out about that exploit, they were probably like, that seems like that makes so much sense for what those two character classes are trying to do. And that combo in a way is really fun and exciting. Like, oh, look at how cool this is. But it makes the game, it throws the balance of the game completely out the window.
Yeah,
Because now you
yeah,
can just, what would they call that? I learned this term recently where there's mapping, where you're just running around the map. Like you're so overpowered that you're just trying to fill out the map. You're not even, there's no challenge at all. It's just like basically like I'm trying to explore every corner of this map and I'm just running around and everyone's dying because I'm too
yeah.
overpowered.
Yeah, and I
Um,
think it was particularly a problem because they had a side mode where there was like a preset dungeon you could run, and there was like leaderboards for getting through the dungeon the fastest and stuff. And of
oh
course, that
man.
combo was just obliterating everything. So I think from what I remember, that was the big reason it was a problem. I could be totally wrong, but that's what I remember.
I mean that seems legitimate to me. And also feels relevant to trading card games as well, because if you can have those two cards that combo together that no one ever thought about, and they
Yeah,
start running a format where they start making other players have not a lot of fun, that's where
yeah,
that's where
I,
unfortunately there has to be some intervention, and we're trying
yeah.
to avoid that as much as we can. But
Yeah. That even kind of reminds me of some of the combos I saw when I was trying to play like modern Magic, where it was like, oh, I have this two card combo that generates me infinite mana, and then here's a walking ballista that does all your life, and it's turn three, and I'm like, wow, this was a great game we just played.
right, right. I mean, and like those, Fable's End has some. I've briefly alluded to this in previous podcasts, but Fable's End does have some mechanics that prevent that. Uh,
Yeah,
it's not totally immune to cards running away with the game, but there's so many base mechanics in the game that prevent that sort of, oh, one, there is no mana, so you can't just infinitely generate one particular stat. And even if you could, like power, I think the only stat that I would really be concerned about would be embers. If there was like a way to make 25 embers, that could
especially
be
if they were
potentially a
wild.
problem. Yeah, right. Especially if they're wild, right? Because then you can just tear through your opponent's entire story and then win the game. But
Yeah,
even then, that's just dependent upon them not being able to block. So there's a lot more to set up. Um,
Right.
and we're very, very careful. There's really only one effect or two effects in the game that are currently will give more embers, that will add embers to units.
Yeah, I think it's
So
two.
I think it's two. Yeah. And those are within all the expansions that we've designed. So it's not like those
Yeah.
effects come up very often. And they're pretty, it's like plus one ember. It's not like plus X embers where X is the number of skulls in your losses. Like it's nothing crazy like that. So
Right.
um but yeah, we're hitting that 30-minute mark. So what is something that you're really looking forward to the most about Fable's End?
I think honestly the biggest thing for me is just seeing how more stories get interpreted into it. Because I mean, like almost everyone has been saying, like you have such like this evocative art style that like is really like cool and really like interprets everything in this really like nice way. Like I think I remember showing you, one of my friends described it as an art style I could drink like soup. Um, uh, but also like the way the game system works, it feels like it really makes sense to me the way that like the flavor and mechanics can come together that just feels right to me. So I'm really excited to see, okay, how is this fairy tale going to work in the game? How is this one going to work? How is that character going to look in Steven's art style? So just the more stories that come into it and what's going to happen with those is probably what I'm most excited about.
I don't know how to respond to that. Every time when I hear that, I'm like, I don't see what you guys are seeing, but I appreciate it. I'm
I feel like
flattered and I feel humbled, and I don't know what to say.
I feel like
Um,
most creators probably feel like that, at least maybe once they're like, like 20 years into being a recognized artist, they're like, okay, I kind of get it now. But I feel like most people are like, what? Little old me doing my thing? Okay.
Man, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. I've gotten to that point where I can look at my artwork now and just be at peace with it and just sort of be like, well, some pieces I like, some pieces I don't like. It's done. It feels like a box to check now. Not that there isn't any, no, that's not accurate. It doesn't feel like a box to check, but it's, there's always, I care about it, but
Yeah,
I've
and I
learned
guess
to kind of let go.
yeah, and since you're the one making it, you know where like all the little bits that didn't work how you wanted to are. But then whenever anyone else sees it, they just see the final product and not like the process or the initial vision. So I guess that's probably an element of why there's a disconnect.
I think so. I think as a creator, you're never really going to fully, you can try to put yourself into the I don't want to say consumer or the viewer, the consumer, however you want to, whatever word you want to use to describe that. You can put that yourself into their shoes, but you're never going to be able to fully understand them,
Right.
and it's more about, I mean, this feels like I could go on and talk about this for like, this feels like a whole other topic on another podcast together. And you and I mean, both you, just so everyone knows, Jarrett is also a writer and a creator, and he may or may not admit that in this podcast, but he is. Um,
Yes, I admit
and
that. I'm
okay,
guilty.
okay. Um, but I feel like you and I should actually do another podcast that's just about that topic altogether. Just like the idea, I think that the concept, the conversation around creating things and being a creator, and the relationship between the creator and the viewer or the consumer is can be really complex, and it can be difficult to navigate sometimes. Um,
Yeah.
and it's really rewarding because it's just how, when someone tells you that they enjoy what you've made, it feels very life affirming. And that's how it feels for me when I make something like Fable's End, and people tell me that they're like, "Oh, I really like the art." That's incredibly life affirming. I don't think I've ever experienced anything more life affirming than that. Like that is what I'm put on this earth to do, and that not it's not just that I'm making it for myself. It's like other people can enjoy it is everything to me.
Yeah.
Um, Jarrett, it's been a pleasure. I feel like I really want to talk to you more. I mean, I wish we could keep going. Like, I feel like you and I could chat for another 30 minutes. But I
Yeah.
have to stick to my guns with the time limits here.
Okay.
Uh, But
I'll,
you will be on this podcast again. I'm gonna try it. We're gonna hit the like next rotation where Tylen will be on again, Eric will be on again, you will be on again, Kwame will be on again,
yeah,
our programmers will be on again.
yeah. I'll just turn my brain off so I don't have any thoughts leaking out until the next one, so we can make sure all the conversation is
Yes,
recorded.
hold those in. Do not say anything for the next 3 months until I get you back on this podcast. Um, but it's been long overdue, Jarrett.
Yeah,
You've been with us for so long. I feel like a scheduling thing that you couldn't get on earlier than this, and we just kept missing each other. But
yeah.
I really feel like I wish that you had been one of our first people on, just because you've been with us for so long. So I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate you being part of the project.
I
And
really appreciate you allowing me to be part of this.
yeah, it's not even like it's not at all hard for me on any level for you to be a part of it because you bring so much to it. Um, and I'm really looking forward to where we go next. So, but we'll stop here. We'll save some for next time. And everyone out there, stay tuned. We'll have another episode, and we hope that you all have a good day or good night. And we'll see you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye.